Having a growth mindset is such a hot topic right now, but it's not as easy as learning about what one is and then claiming to have one. Because if it was, then you wouldn't feel so frustrated that you've been putting a massive effort into your personal growth and growing your business without seeing the results you want. Part of the reason why that happens is because you can get stuck in growth mindset traps, which means you'll keep hitting ceilings in your creativity, productivity, income, not because of your strategy, but because of how you're thinking. However, if you can spot these patterns, you'll be able to see where you've effectively been playing small. And if you can shift these patterns, you'll be able to unlock the growth you want so you can feel effective, abundant, and creatively on fire again. Let's get curious. The first trap is what I like to call delusional optimism, the conviction that with a growth mindset and enough determination, you'll be able to overcome any and every constraint. And I love me some good outrageous thinking as much as the next person. I genuinely regularly practice thinking of 6 impossible things before breakfast just to exercise my creativity and stretch my limits. But I don't turn these things into my goals. Here's why. At first glance, believing you can do anything sounds admirable, expansive, and growth-minded. Yet when someone declares, my business will bring in 7 figures this year, while lacking a tested offer, lead gen engine, or reliable sales process, they're just setting themselves up for disappointment. Our Lady and Savior, Carol Dweck, author of the book Mindset, cautions us that simply repeating, you can do anything, is just empty reassurance. Real growth requires systematically building the skills and gathering the resources necessary to make bigger outcomes possible. When that developmental work is skipped, the delusional optimism trap turns inspiration into self-sabotage. And when inflated goals start feeling like proof of progress, we slide directly into the next trap: safety and metrics. Many entrepreneurs would rather have 1 million followers than 1,000 customers who buy everything they create because having a big dashboard feels like an accomplishment. And it is a bragging right, if nothing else. Because nothing screams thought leader like a vanity plaque that says 100,000 subscribers when you have no idea what your customer LTV is. What I'm getting at is, what if the safety that you feel in hitting those big numbers is the very thing that's holding back your growth? Developing a growth mindset is supposed to help us accomplish more, and objective numbers can tell us what direction we're heading in. But that's precisely the danger of the safety and metrics trap. Big numbers numb the anxiety and the discomfort that you should feel when things under the surface aren't working. For example, let's say that you're a course creator. You're hitting your sales targets, but how many of those students are even finishing your course? Falling into the safety and metrics trap means that as long as you're hitting your KPIs, you don't have to ask harder questions like what holes exist in your processes, or whether your sales numbers or a handful of positive testimonials are blinding you to the fact that your course completion rate or some other measure of customer success sucks. It means you don't bother to examine whether your metrics even measure what matters. But what happens when you're not hitting your numbers? Then you might be falling into the next trap. Let me ask you this. Would you still feel self-approval if your next launch flops? If your answer is probably not, then you're about to see why the conditional bait-and-switch trap keeps high achievers quietly stuck. Early in my coaching days, I'd finish a launch, miss my targets, and sink into a spiral of frustration, disappointment, and shame, which ultimately prevented me from being able to look objectively at the results to analyze what went wrong and how to proceed. Even though I was engaging a growth mindset by focusing on the effort, resources, and strategy I used for my launch, I was still postponing feeling any positive emotions until I achieved different results, and my self-worth was still tied up in the outcomes. Exactly what happens when you have a fixed mindset. Conditional approval keeps you in a fixed mindset where every outcome is allowed to determine your worth. If you hit your goal, you're a success. If you don't, you're a failure. Every time you miss a launch goal, a content creator somewhere loses a ring light. The self-criticism you feel when you fail kills your creativity. Experimentation stops, and you end up optimizing for external praise rather than genuine progress. In Dweck's research, this is the antithesis of growth, which is supposed to be action-oriented and curiosity-driven. If you're using a growth mindset to achieve more, yet only giving yourself acceptance when you get the outcomes you were hoping for, you've fallen for the conditional bait-and-switch trap. You still have a fixed mindset. So what happens when you stop letting numbers determine whether you're worthy of praise or condemnation? Many people swing the pendulum the other way and decide, metrics are just numbers. I'm above all that. Which is also something I've done. When my launches kept missing their targets, I got tired of feeling defective. So my solution was to announce, mostly to myself, but occasionally to my colleagues, I don't care about the money. I just want to help people. Your bank balance is, just a social construct, man. The problem was I did care. Each time I saw the numbers not matching up with my expectations, I felt a knot in my stomach. When you're outwardly detached, but inwardly still fixated and anxious, you're now experiencing classic cognitive dissonance. Aloof Achievement is a deceptive trap because it sounds nice, but by proclaiming the results don't matter, you avoid self-examination entirely. Even if you can get yourself to fully believe results aren't everything, 3 things happen. First, you disconnect yourself from reality. When you say that metrics don't matter, you give yourself permission to ignore data that could improve your offer, marketing, sales process, and so on. That means, secondly, you lose the feedback loop. Progress in business relies on measurable signals. If you dismiss those signals, you're now blind. You can't tell whether a tweak helped or hurt. Third, detachment breeds stagnation. Without numbers to inform your next move, you default to doing more of the same. Revenue plateaus, learning stalls, and you're left guessing why nothing is changing. Disengagement feels safer than disappointment, but it comes with high costs. Before we go on, this all might sound like conflicting information, and at this point you might be wondering, hold on. First you warned me about chasing metrics, then you just told me not to ignore them. So which is it? Should I care about the numbers and whether I hit my goals or not? Short of being able to ask Dweck about this, and I do hope to be able to interview her one day, this is how I've come to think about it. The short answer is yes, the numbers do matter, but not in the way that hustle culture trains us to think about them. When most of us set goals, we fuse them to our identity. Revenue, followers, or weight on the scale become proof of your personal worth. So every failure feels like a catastrophic blow to your ego. So ideally, you want to remain detached, and detachment is different from indifference. It means using numbers as information, not validation. While a traditional goal says, I must hit 7 figures or I've failed, a detached goal says, I'd like to hit 7 figures and I'll measure my progress, but my real commitment is to the system that gets me there. The focus then shifts from your ego to skill acquisition and from your KPI dashboard to your daily processes. Detachment protects you from the extremes, the vanity high when numbers surge and the existential crash when they fall. It keeps you in the present moment where real iteration happens, while still giving you a clear directional target. In short, care about the numbers as diagnostics, but not as a report card on your value. If you want to learn more about turning insights like this into traction, I've put together a set of actionable frameworks and prompts and a short behind-the-scenes video into a free download called the Mindset Trap Rescue Pack. Hit the link in the description and you'll get instant access to the guide and the companion video walking you through exactly how to escape each trap. All right, now that we've cleared up the question of whether you should care about the numbers or not, let's move on to the next trap. Because when numbers lose their charge, many founders reach for the one prize that they can still award themselves with: hard work. Hustle culture is all about celebrating effort. The logic is simple. If I'm exhausted, I must be succeeding. I lived by that grind set for years, working throughout the day from the time I woke up until I forced myself to go to bed. Yet for 3 years, my revenue refused to move. One day, after I'd been complaining about this yet again, my partner at the time, Alex, said to me, "Yeah, I see how hard you're working, and you deserve success more than anyone, but are you sure you're working on the right things?" I didn't have an answer, and that said pretty much everything it needed to. A strong work ethic feels laudable, but when hours worked becomes your success metric, here's what happens. You mistake any movement for momentum. Every email sent, every item checked off your to-do list feels like advancement, even if nothing fundamental changes. Since you already feel validated, you stop evaluating your efficiency and efficacy. But pausing to actually look under the hood feels like time you can't afford to spend, so you never actually stop to reflect long enough to see that most of your grinding is misallocated. Then, when this goes on for long enough, your body burns out, your business plateaus, and you're left banging your head against the wall, wondering why you can't get ahead. Fun fact, the original Latin for entrepreneur directly translates to one who asks ChatGPT, am I burnt out at 3 a.m.? But maybe you are reflecting, you're thinking hard, maybe you're even overthinking things, which triggers the next trap, what I like to call the infinite pivot spiral. So you've worked yourself into exhaustion and you're still not seeing traction. The instinctive next move is to change something. New niche, new offer, new pricing model, new marketing tactic, fresh branding. And Dweck supports this too, as she wrote in regards to false growth mindsets. The process includes more than just effort. We want to understand the importance of trying new strategies when the one you're using isn't working. At first, this pivot feels rejuvenating, but if you're pivoting too often, you're going to be moving in a circle instead of advancing forward. All that motion looks impressive, but you're still not going anywhere. I know this pattern really well. I began online as a personal trainer, then I shifted to nutrition coaching, broadened my focus to mindset coaching before niching down to food relationships and body image. Each switch delivered a temporary spike of excitement and plenty of new design work, logos, domains, color palettes, and my personal favorite, naming new offers. But revenue barely budged. It was only when I committed to one lane long enough to study my audience, refine my offer, and iterate on feedback that things really started to flow. The danger is obvious once you step back. Each pivot resets the compounding effects of consistency. You're jumping ship before audience trust has time to take root. Data on what works evaporates because the offer keeps changing. Momentum shatters across half-finished experiments, and it becomes impossible to tell if a tactic failed or was simply abandoned too soon. What feels like agility is often avoidance in disguise, an attempt to escape the discomfort of slow, iterative improvement. And speaking of escape, this last trap, mindset over mechanics, explains why prioritizing your mindset can stall your progress as quickly as making frantic swaps. When they're not seeing the progress they want, instead of deciding to pivot, many entrepreneurs decide the real problem is internal. The remedy becomes more mindset work. On the surface, that's pretty reasonable. Mindset drives behavior. But when hours that should go into offer refinement, sales calls, or ops are spent on morning pages, mood boards, and yet another 90-minute podcast on abundance, your to-do list still feels full, but nothing concrete ships. The mindset over mechanics trap is appealing because mindset work can feel safer or easier. No market feedback, no rejection, no tedious spreadsheets. It lets you feel proactive while sidestepping the discomfort of mechanical execution. The danger is subtle because you think you're being productive. I perfected this avoidance strategy. My morning routine stretched to the point where by the time I'd finished, no joke, it wasn't morning anymore. Meditation, visualizations, gratitude pages, breathwork, somatic work, journaling prompts to uncover the core beliefs that were keeping me from making more money. Meanwhile, my partner rolled out of bed, brewed coffee, and opened his laptop. He spent those same hours delivering actual work. It makes sense if you've found yourself here. Mechanics are hard, so it's no wonder we want to hide behind reflection over execution. But while mindset is essential, it's not sufficient. Now that you're aware of all these traps, and hopefully you've been keeping track of which one are ones you might be stuck in, the big question is, how do I break out so I can turn this self-awareness into revenue, momentum, and impact? I put every practical fix, my field-tested frameworks, prompts, and a short behind-the-scenes video into a free download called the Mindset Trap Rescue Pack. Hit the link in the description and you'll get instant access to the guide and the companion video walking you through exactly how to escape each trap and turn your insight into traction so you can live not just a good life, but an excellent one.